Well, good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? Welcome. I am so excited. We are kicking off this brand new sermon series today called Be the Blessing. And we are going to have so much fun over the next 4 weeks. You're not going to know what to do with yourself. I think this is going to be the most exciting 4 weeks of our year. And you're going to want to be here each and every week. Back in September, we did a series called For. Do you guys remember that? Say yes. For Ohio Valley. And we talked about, we really kind of shaped the future, like where are we going? What kind of church are we going to be? And we want to be known for what we're for, not what we're against. We want the Ohio Valley to know that we are for them, for our community, that we are part of our community, that we are cheerleaders for our community, that we want the best for our community. We're going to look for ways to serve our community, and we're going to look for ways to love our community. Do you remember that? Yes, all right, good. And that was so important. We needed to do that because as we moved to this venue, as we moved to the Capitol Theater, why? For the Ohio Valley. It all was very, very important. Now, this is kind of like 4 2.0. 4 2.0. Wow. Anyway, Be the Blessing. This next 4 weeks, we are going to put legs on that. We are going to come together as a congregation and we are going to do some amazingly fun things and we are going to get very, very practical in serving our community and we're going to have a blast doing it. About 15 years ago, a little less, a little more, my wife came to me and with some news that we were going to have a baby. And I was a little shocked by that. That's good news, right? You're going to have a baby. That's good news. But I was looking around at the world, and it was changing so very fast. And the moral pendulum of our culture was swinging kind of from moral back towards something else. And I'm looking at all of that, and I looked at Christy, and I said, how are we going to raise a great kid in the middle of a world that seems to be morally coming unwound? I mean, what do we do? How do we instill our values in this child, whatever this child ends up being? He's now almost 14 years old and his name's Deuce. But at that point, we were a little freaked out. Any parents ever feel that? Like your first kid, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And so I was reading a book at the time, and the author of the book suggested that you come up with a family mission statement, that he had done that with his family, and it's a great way to instill your values in your kid. And I didn't know what our family mission statement would be. And Christy and I were driving along. In fact, I could take you exactly to where we were. We were on Route 414 in upstate New York, just north of Watkins Glen. Her parents used to live up there. And we're driving along, and I don't know what it should be. And she looked at me, and it was like it was the words of an angel. She said, it should be the blessing. And I knew that those words had fallen from heaven because they came from the mouth of an angel. No, just kidding. I knew that it had come from heaven. I'm not kidding, but I am kidding. Because they rang so true. You ever been in one of those situations where it's just like, oh, yeah, why didn't I think of that? I wish I had. She had. And she just, and it was like, yes, that's it. That summarizes what we want to be as a family, what we want to instill in our kids, who we want to be, our legacy and our future and the kids that we want to be the blessing. And so that became our mission statement, has been for 15 years now. And it kind of guides our family and guides our life. Now, if you were around about 8 or 9 years ago, we did a sermon series called Be the Blessing. This is a different sermon series, and all new material. But I am so excited to dust it off and bring it back out again and share it with you because there's so many new folks, and because I want you to maybe even consider making this your mission statement because it comes from Jesus. And it's so good. In fact, if I could summarize my personal mission statement, we have the family mission statement, Be the Blessing. My personal mission statement is helping people find and follow God. Does this sound familiar? By being the blessing. Because I think that's exactly what Jesus gave us to do and the strategy he gave us to do it with. Jesus boiled it all down to being the blessing. Jesus boiled it all down to being the blessing. He was asked one day by a religious scholar. Jesus If you had to boil the whole Bible down to one thing, one command, one thing in the whole Bible, what would it be? And you know what he said? Be the blessing. No, he didn't say that. He sort of said that. He said, love God with everything you are. Is anybody familiar with this passage? Jesus says, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But Jesus didn't leave it at that. The guy was like, well, that's brilliant. That's it. But then Jesus goes and he adds another. He goes, the second is like it. It doesn't stand alone. The second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And that was so radical for them. Because the Jewish perspective in the first century was that religion was between you and God. Does this sound familiar? Say yes. This is what people say today. My religion's personal, right? It's just personal between me and God. Jesus was like, no, it's not. No, it's not. For them, it was, I go to church enough, I say enough prayers, I give enough money, I do the right things between me and God. It's this vertical relationship and everything's good. And Jesus was like, absolutely not enough. In fact, the primary way you love God is by loving other people. So, as I said, Jesus boiled it all down to being the blessing, because loving other people is just a way to say being the blessing. Because love isn't an emotion, right? Love is an action. It's a choice. It's the way we treat other people. And Jesus linked the two things, loving God and loving people. The way we love God is by loving other people. And if you look at the rest of the teachings of Jesus, this is exactly what he teaches over and over again. You give somebody a cup of cold water in my name, it's like giving it to me. His best friend, John, if you read the book of John, it's one of the four gospels, accounts of Jesus' life. John, according to John, was Jesus' best friend. And we don't know if he was. He was Jesus' best friend. And so John captures this and teaches this as well. John, and he wrote a series of letters, 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John. These are really creative guys. He came up with this. 1 John chapter 4, he says this, whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. I love that. He's not mincing words. If you claim to love God, you're going to church and you're doing all the right church things and God things, but you hate somebody else, you're a liar. See, Jesus linked loving our neighbor and loving our brothers and sisters to loving God. You can't separate the two. You're a liar. And then he comes around, he says, for whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. Be the blessing. Jesus taught it. John taught it. The Apostle Paul taught it. The apostles taught us to be the blessing. Not only did Jesus teach us this, but all of the apostles taught this as well. We find the Apostle Paul writing to his young disciple, Timothy. Timothy's a young guy, late teens, early 20s. He's pastoring a church, doesn't know what he's doing. The whole church thing is just getting started. And Paul writes Timothy a letter and says, here's your sermon for this week. And here's your sermon for this week. And he gives him this sermon to teach. And it's 1 Timothy 6:17. You'd be familiar with this if you've been here a couple weeks, because we just talked about this a couple weeks ago. He says this, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant nor to put their hope in wealth. Now, here's what you have to understand about the early church. There weren't many rich people. And in fact, the Roman Empire, the Roman culture, there were a handful of very wealthy people. And there was no middle class, and the rest of the society was very poor or slaves. And the church was spreading like wildfire. The message of Jesus was spreading like wildfire among the poor and the slaves. So it was mostly people who didn't have means to do much, right? And he says, command those who do have means, because there were some wealthy people among them, those who do have the ability to be the blessing with their stuff, command them to be the blessing with their stuff. Not to put their hope in their stuff, but their hope in God, who gives us, he says, who provides us with everything for our enjoyment. It's all right that they have stuff. But, and here's the caveat, verse 18 is the caveat, Jesus says, command them, let's read this together out loud. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. What would be a good way to summarize that? Command them to be the blessing. Command them to be the blessing. See, the Apostle Paul got this. But not just the Apostle Paul, the Apostle Peter did as well. Peter wrote a letter or several letters that got circulated around the early churches. And in 1 Peter 2, he says this, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, which they did, the Christians were persecuted and hunted down and accused of all kinds of horrible things that weren't true. He said, even though they accuse you of doing wrong, that they may see your what? Good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Guys, this is what Christians do. This is Jesus boiled, what's the most important thing? Be the blessing. John, Peter, Paul, Mary, if she had written a book, because Peter, Paul, and Mary, they all said, be the blessing. And it was strategic. At one point, Jesus says, you're the light of the world. Let your good deeds shine before men, that they might give glory to your Father in heaven. Same thing that Peter says here. This is what Christians do, because this is what Jesus taught. This is what the apostles taught. And this is how the world changed. Guys, the world was so very different that these folks were living in than we live in. And it's been influenced by them. But not only is this how the world changed, not only is this how the world changes, not only is this how our community changes, this is how God changes us as well. Being the blessing blesses you. Being the blessing blesses you. And here's why, and here's how. Because as you get your eyes off yourself and put them on other people, your heart starts to come alive. We have been conditioned in our society through media. We are messaged, I don't know how many thousands of times a day, that it's all about us. It's all about you. And when we buck that trend, when we can get our head out of our own headspace and see the people around us, our hearts begin to come alive. And as you see God move in you and through you and use the things that he's given to you to impact other people's lives, man, life starts to get really good. And it begins a process of changing you. And as you see him move, your faith builds. And as you see him be faithful, your faith gets stronger. And as you see him come through again, as you take a risk and he comes through, man, your heart is blessed. Your life is better. Your mood is improved. And you're living the way you're supposed to be. In Proverbs 11, verse 24, it says this, one gives freely, yet grows all the richer. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. Now this is a principle, right? This is in the book of Proverbs, and this is a principle, and it rings true. I mean, we see this. People who are generous, people who live open-handed, not only live open-handed and are willing to share, but they're open-handed and able to receive as well. And blessing comes back on them. And that's not always financial blessing. Sometimes it is. But it is spiritual blessing. It is relational blessing. It is blessing of the soul. And as you learn to trust in God, things get better. It is the life that's really life. That's what the Apostle Paul called it. At the end of 2 Timothy or 1 Timothy 6, he says, command those who are rich to be the blessing and to share. And he says, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. What is that life? That's a life full of joy and peace and kindness and love. And your heart comes alive and things begin to change. And here's what I know. Here's what I know about you. You're sitting there looking at me right now going, okay, that's who you want to be, isn't it? On your best day, when your head's clearest and you're not living in fear or overwhelmed, that's who you want to be. It's who we all want to be. We want to be fully alive. We want to live the life that's really life, and we want to be generous and kind. We want to be that person. That's who I want to be. And that's what Jesus taught us to do. Now, the early Christians, they got this. And as I said, they were poor, right? Most of them were poor. They chose to be the blessing too. Everybody chose to be the blessing. They were outrageously generous, kind, and sacrificial. And yet they were known, the early Christians, and this is in the Bible, but this is also in historical text of the time. The Christians were noted for being the blessing. They were known for taking care of the poor, not just their poor, but the poor of the pagans and the people around them. Anybody who needed, they took care of. They were known for nursing the sick. In fact, I don't know if you know this or not, but the whole idea for hospitals grew out of the church. But early on, the Christians would go into cities, or they would stay in cities that were being ravished by plagues. As all the wealthy people were getting out of town, they would go in and they would take care of the sick and the dying, and they would bury those who had passed away, and they would take care of, make sure everybody had food and got what they needed to make it through at the risk of their own lives. They blessed their enemies. Jesus taught them this. He said, bless your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And they did. And they did. They even adopted the babies of the pagans. The Roman culture was so immoral. If you go back and study that time, it's mind-blowing how immoral it was. One of their practices was if somebody had a baby and they say they were hoping for a boy and it was a girl, or if it had some kind of defect or disability, it was completely legal and expected that you would put that baby out on the street or out in a field and let it succumb to exposure. It was called exposure, and they just disposed of their babies that way. And the Christians were like, no way. Every life matters. And they went around and they collected these babies and they adopted them and they raised them as their own. And in a world that made no sense, in a world that morally was just completely antithetical to who they were and what they believed, they continued to be the blessing, to be the blessing, to be the blessing over and over again in a culture marked by paganism, in a culture marked by hedonism. The Romans were pagans. They worshiped multiple gods. They had temples all over the place, and they would go to these temples, and they had all these sexual rituals and temple prostitutes, and it was pedophilia was considered okay and normal and legal, and adultery, like they questioned whether they even needed marriage anymore because adultery was all over the place. And of course they had the death culture. Not only did they just dispose of their babies out on the street for exposure, but they would just murder thousands of slaves to keep, the crucifixion thing. That was a way they kept their slaves in fear so that they just torture them, a bunch of them, so the other ones wouldn't think about rebelling, and they thought nothing of killing thousands of people. That was the Roman culture. People are like wringing their hands going, boy, it's never been this bad. I can't believe how bad things are today. Really? I mean, we're nowhere close to that. I mean, I'll give you this. If we were here morally as a culture and the pendulum is swinging, it's definitely swinging back, but we are not over here. Right? This is the world that the Christians lived in. This is the world that the early Christians chose to be the blessing in. And something absolutely amazing happened as they chose to bless those who persecuted them, as they chose to be the blessing. The world bent to them, not the other way around. They were outrageously generous. They were outrageously kind. They were sacrificial and they were loving. And they chose to be the blessing to a world that had no blessing for them. And in 300 years, the world changed. In 300 years, the world became a different place. paganism faded and Christianity grew. A movement that shouldn't have made it out of the upper room. Like, we go back to the book of Acts, and you got 125 people hiding out because they're afraid that the authorities are going to hunt them down and kill them too. You've got every power in Judaism stacked up against them, and they're in Jerusalem, hunting them down, trying to find them, trying to shut them up, trying to wipe them out. And then you get the Roman Empire doing that as well. You got Nero burning Christians as torches in his garden to wipe out Christianity and scare the Christians, hunting them down, trying to wipe it out. And this movement goes from, Jesus never wrote anything down. He had 100 people and all things stacked against them. And it goes from that to transforming the culture of the world in 300 years without social media, let me remind you. How? Why? What the heck happened? It was a revolution. It was nothing short of a revolution. And it was not a political revolution. Those don't last. It wasn't a violent revolution, because those don't last either. It was a revolution of blessing. It was a revolution of love. And they chose to do what Jesus taught. And they lived different than the world around them. And the world became like them, not the other way around. And guys, I'm here to tell you, as this pendulum swings in our day and age, it can swing back when the church decides to be the church. When followers of Jesus decide, you know what? It's not about me. That's what our culture is teaching us. I'm going to be the blessing. The world changes. It's happened before. It will happen again. God's not done. So here's the plan. I can't control the whole world, and I don't get to talk to Christians everywhere, but I do get to talk to you guys, right? And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this here because we can do this here. And over the next 4 weeks, we are going to purposely decide to live this out, to be the blessing, to change our world, to change our valley. And we're going to practice it together. I've got 3 goals for us. 1, we're going to have fun. This is the life that's really life. 2, I want you to get a taste of being the blessing, of living a life that is for other people. And as you go through your weeks, over the next several weeks, purposely focus your eyes on others. And as together we practice these things, you're going to get a taste for it, and your faith is going to build. And hopefully it catches on and becomes a permanent part of your life. And the 3rd goal is this, that we will impact our community and our world for Jesus, because that's what doing what Jesus taught does. You with me? All right. So we're going to do 4 things. We have 4 Be the Blessing plays over the next 4 weeks. The first one is this. We're going to do a special offering, and we are going to collect all the money that we possibly can, and it all goes out to the community to bless our community and bless organizations in our community. So we're going to do that. Second thing we're going to do is we are going to do Operation Christmas Child. And if you don't know what Operation Christmas Child is, if you do, you've already got your box, you already got it packed. That's awesome. How much fun is that? It's so fun. If you don't know what Operation Christmas Child is, on your way out today, there are boxes. They're the size of a shoebox. They're red and they're green. Here's what you do. Take one with you. You pack it full of toys, and it'll tell you exactly what to do. And you bring it back next weekend. And we will load them into a truck. That truck will go to Boone, North Carolina. From Boone, North Carolina, they'll be processed, put on a plane, and they will be flown to the other side of the world, to a country and to a kid who would not get a Christmas present otherwise. And they're not only going to get a Christmas present from you this year in just a few weeks, but they're also going to get the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is so much fun packing those boxes. We got a team of people who are going to be working in our warehouse this week and into next week doing that, packing those boxes into bigger boxes and putting them on the truck. We are the regional receptacle for Operation Christmas Child at our warehouse, and so we've got 6 or 7,000 boxes that'll be coming in over the next week. But we're going to participate. If you've not done this, get a box on the way out today. Bring it back next week. We're going to celebrate, And this is just another way to practice being the blessing. So Operation Christmas Child is number 2. The third thing we're going to do, we're going to volunteer in our community. I'm going to ask every one of us to give a couple of hours over the next 6 weeks to serving one of our strategic partners in our community. And guys, we can't do everything. The church is not, we're not experts in caring for all the different needs, but there are organizations in our community that we can partner with, and we can help them win, and we can serve them, and we can come and bring resources and volunteers and blessing. And we've got about 10 organizations we're going to work with over the next weeks and really on into the future, the partner organizations in our community. So that's number 3. You're going to volunteer. Number 4, we're going to bring some food to feed the hungry. I am personally convinced that nobody should go hungry in our town. As long as there is a church in Wheeling, West Virginia, nobody should go hungry. And so we are going to... So I'm going to ask you, this is the last week of the series, I'm going to ask you to go shopping and buy lots of food. And then bring it here, and we're going to load it onto a truck, and we're going to take it over to the house of the carpenter, and we're going to stock their food pantry so that people have food for the Christmas season and that people have food to get through the winter. So those are the 4 plays. Does that make sense? Okay. The one we're focusing on today is the special offering. Now take a deep breath. I am not going to shake you down, I promise. All right, this is not a high-pressure deal. This is an invitation to participate. And if we all participate, it really is quite a doable thing to have a huge impact on our community. So we have 10 strategic partners. Some of them we've been partnering with for over a year. One of them is the House of the Carpenter. They're right there, not on the screen, right across the river from us, right directly behind me. They serve Wheeling Island and downtown Wheeling. They have a food pantry. They have a clothes closet. They do programming for youth. They do programming for adults. They minister to the less fortunate in our community, and they're doing a phenomenal job, and we're very privileged to be partnered with them. We're going to help them out financially, and we're going to help them out with some volunteering as well. Youth Services Systems is another one. Youth Services does something in the winter called the Winter Freeze Shelter. We did this last winter. We're doing it again. We're going to cook food for the homeless population of Wheeling for the winter. We're going to cook them dinner for all winter long. So it's about 2,200 to 2,500 meals. Ziegenfelder's Popsicles, we'll freeze it for them. And so we'll cook it all in a week, put it up, and every night during the coldest months of the winter, homeless folks don't have to freeze to death under bridges. They have a warm place to come, and they get a warm meal in the name of Jesus from the Vineyard Church. Way to go, guys. Russell Nesbitt, they work with special needs adults in our community. Last year we threw them a Christmas party and bought them Christmas presents. We're going to do the same thing this year. It is the coolest thing ever. If you get to go to the party, we'll let you know when it is. You can go, and it is so fun. Such a cool thing to be the blessing that way. Last year we did a community garden, not a community garden, it was a sensory garden at Madison School, partnering with Grow Ohio Valley. When we were at Madison School, which is just right over here, oh, there it is. Yeah. If you keep going in that direction, you'll end up at Madison School on Wheeling Island. What we realized is we need to partner with Madison School. Madison School is one of, if not the poorest school in the state of West Virginia, and it is they have this index of trauma, childhood traumas, that they do with kids throughout the state. It is the highest ranking, like they get the most trauma. It's stuff you wouldn't believe, and I'm not even going to talk about because it's horrific. And they're doing great because they got a bunch of teachers over there who love Jesus, and they're there because they want to serve these kids. And for years, Madison's been at the bottom of the standardized testing, and they're climbing in the ranks in Ohio County. And They got some folks who just are rocking it. One of them is Barb Randolph, who's come to church here for 30 years, and Barb is kind of at the tip of the spear on that. We are partnering with Madison School. I said, Barb, what can we do? How can we partner together? And she came back with 2 pages of things for us to do with Madison, and I can't wait to do them. I can't wait to do them. And so we're going to be working with Madison and everything from helping with their playground, hopefully, to some programming, to mentoring with kids, and I mean literally 2 pages of stuff. But we're going to be working with Madison School, and we need to be working with Madison School. We're going to work with the city of Wheeling. We're going to work with the Unity Center and the recovery community in Wheeling. One of the things we're going to do is to be the blessing and really reach out to our communities. We're going to bring Chris Dew back in. If you know Chris is a 27-year-old who was wildly addicted to heroin, and God set him free. And he travels around the country speaking not primarily about that, but about Jesus, because it was Jesus that set him free. And he has been here. He's spoken 2 or 3 times in Wheeling, and we're going to bring him in to speak to the recovery community and speak to churches and speak all over the Ohio Valley. And so we're going to bring Chris in. We're partnering with Mary at the Unity Center and some others, and it's going to be really, really cool. The Blue and Gold Christian Center. Blue and Gold Christian Center is, you probably never heard of it. It's in Cameron, West Virginia. And let me tell you the story. I don't know, about 10 or 15 years ago, Shirley is 88 years old. Let's hear it for Shirley. All right. You don't even know what Shirley does, and you're clapping for her. That's great. Shirley was up on a ladder painting last week. I saw pictures of that. They moved to Cameron and quickly realized there's this whole crop of elementary kids who don't have anywhere to go after school, need food and everything else, so they started an after-school program. It became the Blue and Gold Christian Center. They've met in various buildings all over Cameron. The kids come after school, they feed them, they teach them about Jesus, and they found out, well, these kids need clothes, so they started a thrift store, and their parents can come and get clothes. If you think the drug problem's bad in Wheeling, go to Cameron. Right, you got a whole generation that need help, and these guys are the real deal. A couple years ago, they felt like God was saying, "Build a building." They said, "Well, we will if you come up with the money, God." And the next day, somebody gave them a huge check, and they were off and running, and they're finishing up that building. We're going to go down and help them finish that building and get some of the stuff that we specialize in, stuff that we're really good at, like AV equipment and that kind of stuff. And we're going to help get them rolling and wrap that building up so that they can. Right now they're meeting in the basement of a church next door and get the kids and everybody into this new building. And guys, it's the real deal. It's the hands and feet of Christ. Those guys are heroes. Wellspring Crisis Pregnancy Center in Moundsville. The Crisis Pregnancy Center, if you don't know what that is, they work with young ladies who are pregnant, who are wondering whether they should keep the baby or not, or if they can afford to, and they counsel them and they work with them so that they can keep the baby. And so they provide formula and diapers and clothing and furniture and all kinds of stuff like that. And we're going to partner with them. We're going to bring some financial resource there and hopefully some volunteering as well. In Claysville, there is the Specialized Veterans and Elder Care Center, a group of veterans that would be homeless if they didn't have that place. And we're going to go in and help renovate kind of what we did at St. John's last year. We're going to help renovate that space and make it a more livable space for those veterans. And we have to take care of our veterans. I'm so excited about that one. And then lastly, St. John's Home. Last year we did an extreme makeover on a living space for them, which was so awesome. But one of the more profound things we learned last year, we had a group of people we had to get the kids out of the space so we could do the work. And so we had a group of adults that took the kids out all weekend long. And then we discovered that most of these kids had never been out to eat. They'd never had like normal kid experiences that, the rest of us take for granted. And it blew their minds. And they had so much fun with these kids and built relationships with them. Some of these folks still pick up the kids on Sunday morning and bring them to church. We get their prayer requests from week to week. It's powerful. It's so cool with God. That's the church being the church, guys. And so we're working with them to put together experiences like that and opportunities for adults in our church to be the hands and feet of Christ in the lives of those kids. And so that's part of what our special offering is going to go to as well. So that's a lot of it. I don't have time to go over everything, but that's a lot of it. Our goal is $25,000, and I want to raise it today. Here's the deal. $25,000 sounds like a lot of money. If every one of us gives, you ready for this whopping amount? $49.95. It's all I know. It sounds like it's just $49.95. But wait, I do have a but wait. But if every one of us gives $49.95, we're there. Now, some of us can't give $49.95, and if that's where you are, please know there's no shame in that. Everybody, we give as we can. Some of us can give a whole lot more than $49.95. We need to do that. Let's do it. Let's make up for one another and let's get there. Now, but wait, it's just $49.95. But wait, somebody approached me a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, I want to do a matching thing. So if you give $49.95, it's now $100. If you give $500, it's $1,000. If you give $1,000, it's $2,000. We can get there. So we're going for $50,000, guys, and we can do this. And none of it gets spent on the vineyard. It all goes out to being the blessing. Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? So here's how this works. We're gonna do this today. And here's what I want to ask you to do. Do not take the money that you usually give to the vineyard and move it over to the Be the Blessing category, okay? This is a special offering, which means it's special. It's over and above what you usually give. If you do that, we still have bills to pay and lights to keep on and all that stuff. So make your regular giving. Part of the point of this is to stretch us in generosity and stretch our hearts. So I encourage you to do that. If you're not a part of the vineyard and you're like, well, I don't want to give to the vineyard, you're not giving to the vineyard, you're giving through the vineyard. We've just vetted these organizations and, join in. And if you're not even a follower of Jesus, usually with giving, we say, well, if you're a regular around here and you give to support the ministry of the church, that's great. On this one, I want you to participate, even if you're not a follower of Jesus. Because who doesn't want to do these things? Who doesn't want to be the blessing? You can join in as well. None of it's coming to us. Now, there's 4 ways to do this. 1, you got an envelope in your program. If you're the kind of person that likes to write a check or give cash, you can use the envelope, and the buckets will come by in just a little bit. And you can determine on there, I want this much to go to Be the Blessing, this much to go to regular giving. Is that clear? Say yes. All right. The second way, and the best way to give, is text to give. This is easy, and this will take you 2.5 minutes, and I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes. Okay? 2.5 minutes to set up. And here's what you do. You text the amount with blessing next to it to 84321. And you'll get a response text with a link. Click on that response, and it will walk you through setting up text to give. In the future, if you want to give using text to give, it's like 20 seconds and you're done. First time, it's going to be about 2.5 minutes. It's the easiest way, if you're not prepared to give otherwise, the easiest way to do this. You don't have to wait in any lines to give. Third way you can give is you can give online. I discourage this. Actually, I encourage online giving, especially as you're planning and all of that, but you're going to forget unless you write Be the Blessing real big on your hand with magic marker, and then maybe you'll remember. Don't forget if that's what you decide to do. And the fourth way, we're going to have 6 stations in the lobby. They're going to be balloons at each station with a happy person there that can swipe your debit card or your credit card, and you can give that way. All right? $50,000, guys. And I am talking to every single one of us. This is one of the ways that we get to be the blessing is by sharing what we've been blessed with. And this is a really fun way. And then we're going to live this out, and it's going to be so cool over the weeks to come. So, the early church changed the world, not through political force or power, not through violent revolution. Whenever that's been tried, the church, it's gone bad. But by being the blessing. Jesus boiled it all down to being the blessing. Let's do it again. Lord, thank you so much. Thank you that you've blessed us. Thank you that you've given us the ability to be your hands and feet. And thank you, God, that you not only love us, but you love this community. You love this Ohio Valley. And you love the people all over. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. We're going to take just a couple minutes to give you time to prepare your gift, whether that's text to give or otherwise. And we'll listen to this very fun song in the meantime, and then Jen will be out in just a minute.